This is the last part of my video series on how to draw a realistic face. So by now we have drawn everything but the hair, which we will do in this video. And in the end we can also adjust anything such as shadows or highlights anywhere else in the drawing. But for now, let's start drawing the hair. So I actually started by filling in the skin in the parting of her hair with a dirty Q-tip, just so that is done. Then, just as in the previous videos, we want to start with a base layer using an HB pencil. And for this, you want to tilt the pencil a bit so you don't draw so much with the tip of it, and only use light pressure. And I only do it in one section at first. And yeah, then when you have drawn that, you can then blend it out with a tissue paper. Depending on how dark the person's hair is, you may want to create multiple layers like this. And in this case, I made a second layer with the 2B pencil, but I only applied color where the shadows are supposed to be, as you can see if you look at the reference photo. And then I filled in the rest with an HB pencil before I blended it out. Next, I use a sharp 6B pencil and I start drawing the roots of the hair. And the roots are usually darker than the rest of the hair, which is why we use the 6B pencil here. And the technique you want to use is similar to when we drew the eyelashes, but it's still slightly different. So you want to look at the reference photo as usual and see in which direction the hair strands go. And then you want to draw hair strokes and apply less pressure in the end of the stroke before you let go of the pencil. And in the beginning of the hair stroke, you don't want to apply that much pressure either. And as I said, it should be even more decreased, the pressure, towards the end. And if you apply too much pressure when drawing the hair strokes, they may look too blunt. But I mean, of course, you can apply much pressure where the hair is supposed to be darker. But yeah, just not too much, as I said. And when you draw the hair from the head, you also want to make sure that it's not too blunt looking, because you want to make it look like it's actually growing from the head. And you do this by not applying too much pressure and also having a really sharp pencil. Sometimes it also helps to draw the strokes from the inside of the hair, with a lack of a better explanation, and towards the actual head, because as you can see, most strokes I draw from the head to the inside of the hair. But yeah, it's easier to put less pressure in the end of the stroke, which creates a more fine and thin line, if you know what I mean. So yeah, sometimes it helps to do it in the other direction. And as you also can see, I'm not drawing one super long stroke all the way from the roots to the ends of the hair. I actually draw quite short strokes all throughout the hair. And here you can see what I talked about before, about drawing the hair strokes in the opposite direction, more towards the head, because as you can see, this really makes the hair strokes look as if they actually grow from her head or forehead, if you will. So, I mean, it also depends on the hairstyle. So if someone has their hair up in like a ponytail, you would have to do this more on the sides of the forehead. But for this reference photo that we are using, we actually don't need to do this a lot, but it's good to know how to do it. And before I forget, I would also like to remind you to put a piece of paper under the hand that you're drawing with so that you don't smudge anything out on the face that you have drawn, because that would kind of ruin the drawing and we don't want that. So put a paper under your hand as I have done here. So yeah. And as you can see, I draw the hair strokes in random places, and I actually don't know why. I guess I just go on feeling. I mean, you are free to draw them in any order that you want. The main idea is just to draw them in the direction as you see in the reference photo. So after doing a first layer of hair strokes, I very lightly soften them with the tissue paper. You don't want to fade away anything, just make them less harsh. So then you can draw a second layer with the 6B pencil and use the exact same technique, and then of course soften it up with a tissue paper. And on the side here, I just wanted to show you that you can draw the hair strokes in two directions, but just make sure to lift the pencil in between, so you don't want to draw back and forth in one line without lifting the pencil. You want to draw one stroke in one direction, lift the pencil, and then you can go to the other direction and draw the next strokes. I just find that this is much quicker. You don't have to do this. You can do it in just one direction if you want to, but yeah, as I said, it's a bit quicker, so yeah. And as you can see, I'm also using the 2B pencil a little bit on this second layer. So after blending out that second layer, we want to darken up the roots even more. So I used an 8B pencil, just a little bit. And then I go back in with the 6B pencil again and I do the exact same thing. I hope you're okay with me speeding up a few clips, because I mean, I'm just doing the exact same technique as I showed you in the beginning where I didn't speed up, so you can just do the exact same thing. This video would be like 2 hours if I didn't speed it up, because it took me about 2 hours to draw the entire hair, just saying. Okay, no, sorry, I lied. I mean, I didn't lie, but I had to check and it was actually more like 3 hours. So the hair is really time consuming. If you want to make it look realistic, just be prepared for that. Anyways, to make the roots more natural looking, I take a 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil and I draw tiny strokes that, well, grow out from the head, I guess. And I do it obviously in the same technique as I described before, but since this pencil is way more fine than the other pencils, it would just look, more natural, I would say. I then use the 2B pencil and draw some hair strokes where the hair is a little bit darker than the lighter areas, but lighter than the darkest areas, if that makes any sense. And since I didn't make a base layer through the entire hair, I do it in sections. So here I took the HB pencil again and created a base layer a bit further down before drawing the hair strokes on top. And of course I use the tissue paper again, and I also lightly sweep the tissue paper over all of the hair strokes that I previously drew, just to make them softer. So since the hair is slightly lighter here than in the roots, I actually used a 2B pencil instead of the 6B pencil. So yeah, I just drew the hair strokes on top of that base layer, just like before. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. You can also use a kneaded eraser to create some highlights, or just to simply erase anywhere where you feel like you added too much color. Just make sure to shape it so it's very thin so that you can draw thin strokes. I mean, it won't be super thin, but just do what you can do. Then I used the 6B pencil again to create some more and darker shadows, and soon you will also see that I switch to the 8B pencil to draw even darker shadows, just to create those highlights and shadows and create more dimension to the hair so that it will look more realistic. I actually alternate a lot between the different pencils depending on how dark I want everything to be. So a lower number, such as the 2B pencil, would be better to use in lighter areas, whereas the 8B pencil is better for the darkest areas. And if a person has blonde hair, I would maybe only use the HB pencil and the 2B pencil, I think. Potentially also this 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil, but it depends a bit on the lighting in the reference photo and the person's hair color, of course. And yeah, those kind of factors. In this reference photo, the girl has very medium hair, like it's not blonde, it's not dark brown, it's kind of, yeah, a light to medium brown, I would say. So yeah. And here I'm using the 8B pencil to fill in the ears, and you can barely see the shapes of the ear, so I just make a dark shadow. For the flyaways, I use a 2H pencil and also the 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil. And here you just want to draw very light and fine strokes, sort of outside of the hair. So you don't want to apply a lot of pressure with the pencil for this at all. And you also want to make sure that they go a bit in different directions, like they do in the reference photo and like you can see me doing here. So, I mean, you want them to sort of go in the same direction, but you kind of want them to overlap each other, just as I'm doing in the video. And just as I have said in previous videos with other things, you don't have to draw the flyaways in the exact same positions and the exact same directions as they are in the reference photo. You of course want to be as similar as possible, but I'm not like, oh, this little tiny strand of hair needs to go exactly like this. No, I see approximately in what direction many individual hair strokes go, and I just do something. I do it very randomly. Okay, so be approximate but try to be similar. So as you can see now, I still alternate more between the pencils and just simply add more strokes because I want to create some definition and some contrast between the shadows and highlights in the hair and make it look as similar as it does in the reference photo. And actually you can also use a black colored pencil in the absolute darkest areas if you feel like the 8B pencil isn't enough, just like I'm doing here. And again, just make sure to not add too much pressure because you don't want too much contrast between the black pencil and the graphite pencils, since they are quite different. So if you add too much pressure with the black pencil, it may look just a little bit weird, I would say. It depends on your pencil, of course, but yeah, always do a light pressure with the hand and the pencil when you're drawing hair. It's always the safest. And now that we have drawn some hair close to the face, you may notice that you need to create a shadow from the hair on the actual face. So I do this with the 2B pencil, and then I blend it out with the blending stump. Then I take the 2B pencil and I just continue to draw the hair. And I use the exact same technique as before. Actually, I use the same technique in the entire hair unless I say anything else. I also use the kneaded eraser again to create some lighter hair strokes. You can also use a pencil eraser for that if you have a good one, or some type of sharp eraser. In my tutorial on how to draw curly hair with colored pencils, I also show you another technique on how to make lighter hair strokes. And I'm actually also showing you that technique in my video on how to draw realistic fur, but I can't do that technique in this drawing since the paper is too thin. It works way better with a thicker paper, otherwise it can crumble a bit. It may also depend on the quality of the paper, but if you're interested in seeing what technique I'm talking about, I will link those two videos down in the description box. So yeah, I still alternate between the pencils here, and I'm also using a 0.5mm mechanical pencil sometimes. And if you're wondering when to stop doing this, adding more strokes, just look at the reference photo, and if you think your drawing looks similar to the reference photo, you probably don't need to add much more. But if the reference photo has more contrast between the highlights and the shadow, you may need to just continue to add more shadows and potentially some highlights as well. And yeah, when I say if it doesn't look like in the reference photo, obviously if you're a beginner, maybe it doesn't look exactly like in the reference photo. I mean, my drawing doesn't even look exactly like in the reference photo, but what I meant was, yeah, the highlights and the shadows. And I just want to mention that when you draw hair in an area like this, I kind of want to call it a closed area. I don't even know if you understand what I mean, but so from the top, I draw some hair strokes from the top and towards the middle. And if there is some type of highlight in the center, I then draw some strokes from the bottom and towards the middle as well, and that will create a highlight and kind of a shiny effect, so the hair looks a bit shiny. You won't be able to see it that much in this drawing in particular, just because there wasn't a prominent highlight. It was pretty similar in everything. But yeah, the basis is that I draw from the top to the center and from the bottom to the center if the hair is, in a closed area. And what I mean by a closed area is that you can't see the ends. The ends are not exposed and the area is pretty small, I guess. I hope that makes sense, but you can see exactly what I'm doing in the video. And I also forgot to mention that now that I've done the first layer, as you can see here with the second layer, I am drawing sort of darker strokes right at the edges, not in the center so much, but only like on the outer parts. And this will also create a highlighted effect, or sort of a shiny effect. And for those smaller areas, you can soften it out with a Q-tip instead of the tissue paper. And again, I hope you don't mind that I'm speeding it up, but I'm doing everything that I have described to you, so I alternate between the pencils depending on how light or how dark I want everything to be. I also want to mention that on this bottom piece of the hair, I don't use the HB pencil as much to create a base layer, and this is mainly because this part of the hair is lighter, so I don't feel like I need a base layer, because the base layer works very well if you have darker hair to draw, because then you won't risk that white areas from the paper sort of seep through your pencil strokes, if you know what I mean. And this is also why we blend and soften it out a bit after drawing the strokes, because this will prevent sort of those cracks. I don't even know what word to describe, but you know what I mean. So yeah, and I draw the strokes in the directions that they go in the reference photo. Maybe not exactly, of course, as I have mentioned, but approximately. And also don't forget to use the black colored pencils in the areas where you feel like you want to make it slightly darker, because those contrasts between the shadows and the highlights are what really will give life to the drawing and to the hair and make it look more realistic. And here I just wanted to show you that my camera fell down on the paper and made a mark right on the face and also a bit on the hair that I couldn't erase fully, since it created kind of like a dent in the paper. And it was such a shame, because I was actually really happy with this drawing and the face. So yeah, but we will continue to draw the hair anyway, because we have come this far, and hopefully you didn't make the same mistake. I mean, I'm sure you didn't, so I mean, it wasn't my mistake, but it happened. So I may also mention that by the dents that you can see by the ear, you know, there's kind of a bang, and under that bang the hair is a bit darker, because obviously there's a shadow. So yeah, keep that in mind and draw the hair a bit darker there. But you can see that in the reference photo, so hopefully you have already done that. And also between all of the sections, it's sometimes a bit darker, like I drew there to the left. Anyways, we continue drawing the ends of the hair by using the same technique as before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, so I'm not even going to say it again how we are going to think. But in the reference photo, I feel like the hair was sort of divided into sections. So I drew one section at a time, which I think it's much easier, especially since the hair can be a bit time consuming to draw. So I feel like mentally it can be a bit easier to be motivated to draw it if you approach it section by section. And when you approach the area that is closest to the face, the hair is usually a bit darker there, since there's a shadow from the chin and jawline. And then when you approach the hair that is right here, I don't remember what it's called, by the collarbone, I guess, you wanna draw it similar to like you drew the flyaways, but here it's in a more defined strand. So yeah, do that. And because when you also lift the pencil in the end, it will look more natural, as you can see here. And you can also use the 0.3 mechanical pencil to create some flyaways here as well. And as I said, create the hair to be more dark here by the jawline, and then by the ears it's also much darker, and then there are some sort of flyaways there as well by the ear. I also took the 2B pencil and increased the shadows by the neck, because once I had drawn the hair, I felt like it was a little bit too light and I wanted it to be darker to have more definition. So I did that. So as I said in my previous videos, you can always go back and adjust something that you previously drew even after drawing something else. I mean, it's quite obvious, but you may not think about it. And now it's time to draw the other side of the hair, and this is not going to be that much different, so I will speed up most of it. However, on this side she has more hair behind her ear and shoulders, so the shadows will be a bit darker in certain areas. But just to recap, just in case that you have forgot a bit, we first create a base layer with the HB pencil, blend it out with a tissue paper, then create a second layer with the HB pencil and blend it out again. Then we can start drawing the hair strokes, and you can use a 6B pencil for this, or if you want to start light, you can of course start with the HB pencil if you want. And you want to have a light pressure on your hand always, and at the end of the hair stroke you want to slightly lower the pressure and lift the pencil at the very end. And it really helps to flip the paper so that you can draw the strokes in the correct direction more effortlessly. Also, by the ear, I draw the strokes from that part, like from the ear and up, because you want the hair to be darker right behind the ear, and it's kind of like a closed area like I described before, apart from the fact that it's not fully closed, but the ends are not exposed, they're sort of tucked in. So yeah, I draw the hair from that tuck. It's so weird to explain, but I just doing it so that you will understand, and hopefully you do. On this side of the hair strands are also coming a bit towards the forehead, so you want to use either a 0.3 or a 0.5 millimeter mechanical pencil, or you can use both and just alternate between them. And then you want to draw the hair strokes similarly to how we drew the flyaways on the other side of the hair, but of course you are going to draw flyaways on this side as well, on the outer part that is not by the forehead. At this point, nothing is that much different than from the other side of the hair, so we are just adding more shadows by creating more strokes and of course alternating between the pencils. and building everything up layer by layer. I also added some flyaways, don't forget to do that, and potentially you maybe want to add some highlights as well. One thing that is different on this side is that on this lower part of the hair, I actually did use the HB pencil as a base layer, but it was mainly because I found that this hair on this side, since it was tucked behind the shoulder sort of, it was darker, so I felt like it needed a base layer. Since she has her hair tucked back on this side, there is a part that is exposed where you can see that her hair is growing out from her head. So you want to, just as I described before, draw the strokes from the inside of the hair and towards the head, or temples in this case, to make it look like the hair is actually growing out from the head. And as I mentioned, the hair is a bit darker on this side, at least closest to the face, so add more color there. And then a bit more to the right, the hair is a bit lighter. So here I want to use the lighter pencils and also the 0.3 millimeter mechanical pencil. I also used the kneaded eraser a bit to create some highlights. And sometimes when I use the kneaded eraser to create highlights, I find that it looks a bit unrealistic, so I take a mechanical pencil on top and just draw very fine, very light strokes, because that way you will still have the look of hair strands, but it will be much lighter since you sort of have a light background. You can think of it as when we do a base layer with the HB pencil, we create a dark background, but when we use the kneaded eraser, we create a light background. So also in the end, I just increase the shadows further using the different pencils, including the black colored pencil, and I do this until I'm satisfied with the hair. And in the end, you may want to take a step back from your drawing and look at it from afar, because this way you may notice better where some shadows or highlights are missing, and you can then go ahead and adjust that. So you want to do this in the hair first, and then you can look at the rest of the face, the rest of the drawing, and also adjust the shadows and highlights in the rest of the drawing as well. Depending on which area you are adjusting the shadows and highlights in, you just want to be careful so that you don't mess anything up or accidentally fade something out when you blend it. And I could imagine that some people think that it's better to just draw everything perfectly from the beginning, so you don't need to adjust anything and you don't have to be careful and be scared to mess anything up. But believe me, it's easier said than done. Anyways, I think this concludes this video and this entire video series. I really hope you have enjoyed it and that you have learned a lot. I also hope your drawing turned out good. You can show it to me on Instagram if you want to. @artbymichaela is my account, and it will be linked in the description box as always. And if you like this video and this video series, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for future videos. And thank you so much for watching this video and following this video series. I will see you in my next video.